something a question which I am dealing with myself. I'm going to guess that you did this because those elements were not explicitly present in the creed, but you thought they were more necessary for people understanding the story in English.
Right.
But could you discuss your thought processes on this? Because it's my feeling, I'm dealing with the same question myself, that although this is useful for linguists, non-linguists are rather troubled by seeing these brackets. And I just wondered what your judgment had been on deciding to do it that way.
My feeling was that it wasn't that strange, that there are many people who use versions of the Bible that have elements that are italicized, for example, that are additions. And so it wasn't an unfamiliar concept. But I certainly admit that the use of square brackets is a little strange. And there might have been a more artful way of indicating the same thing. But I also haven't had any negative feedback yet.
I haven't really encountered that either because my students now are just beginning to learn to read. And compare, I don't think they've seen the brackets yet.
Yeah.
Because it looks so clear that the two of you are deeply committed, total collaboration. Could you speak to how you began a collaboration? I think many people would like to know how you begin to forge and establish the kinds of relationships that support a long-term, community-based collaboration, such as the one the two of you embody.
Luck.
So you were born a Greek.
No, I'm white. It's
Start
luck.
there.
It's luck finding the right kinds of people and knowing enough people in the community or people who know people to be able to find the right people. I mean, I happened to be in Okima one day, and someone had said that there's a woman who lives in Okima, Oklahoma, who can read and write really well. And the woman I had been working with had passed away, and I had some Greek letters with me, and I showed them to Margaret. Remember, there was a little cafe down in Okima, and she looked at it and she just read it. And these were handwriting from the 1800s, and she had no problem with it. And I knew right then and there that this was a match made in heaven. So I've been a student of Margaret's ever since, and it's worked out. But there are many other communities where there is no one like Margaret, and then it just doesn't succeed. So yeah.
I'd like to ask something about what clearly was a very traumatic experience for the Creek to be removed from one area and put into another by the United States government. And I'm wondering if you have any knowledge of where your family lived before the removal.
Yes, I do. My father and my mother's tribal house.
And where would they be located?
East Alabama and West Georgia.
I was curious to know how and when you learned to read and write correctly.
I don't know when I learned English. I have no recollection of not knowing English. And when I first saw that the language that was spoken at church and that I spoken in a home and everything was written in the little hymn book that my grandmother carried in her apron pocket. And she just happened to take it out one time, which was very unusual for a Creek speaker to take out a song book and sing from it. All I had in it was words. And so that just got my curiosity, and I said, can I read that? And I could see I couldn't read it. But she taught me. I said, which song is it? And they start singing into it. She didn't find it. And then I'd read along. And words that I couldn't read, she would help me. And singing, I could read every song in the book. I didn't know the tunes, but I could read all of them. And that was how I learned how to read. And through the years, I lived in different states. I was nowhere near the Greek language, but I always had the New Testament. And I read it like a novel all the time. and I would speak because I missed my language. If I could hear the words, I felt like I'm not alone. And so it was just something that I did all the time for no reason except for enjoyment and that feeling of security.
Did they, in your school, were your teachers supportive of that they foster your language and your culture? Or?
They're just now being confronted with that issue.
In the interlinear format, the first line is essentially what he had written with a few
Spelling changes.
He changed some vowel symbols and so forth.
Yeah, this was an interesting issue. But go ahead and finish your question.
Well, my question is partly that, I mean, I run into these problems that involve the difference between writing a word that sort of exists all by itself, and then the way something would sound when you ran it all together and connected speech. And I wonder if similar problems like that come up here. I actually sometimes add another line on the top, which is the way people actually say things as opposed to the way they would write separate words. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I think we felt we had enough lines. But that's the nice thing about using the web is that in the future these things can be added and such without, it can be done very cheaply.
Yeah.
But the question I thought you were going to ask is that you noticed there were differences in the spelling in the first line and the spelling that Gouch himself used. Margaret hasn't said this, but Margaret teaches the Creek language, 3 levels of the Creek language at the University of Oklahoma. So how many students do you guys? About 150 students. It's a huge number. And there are no materials. So we were very interested in producing materials for the community, but also for her class. And that meant that we had to normalize this, or we wanted to normalize the spelling so that she could actually use these materials. So what we do is on the web, we have a typescript of his actual spelling, along with Xeroxes of the originals. So it's available for the 5 people who actually want to know that. But the book itself will be normalized so that students and things can read it more easily. But the more interesting question that you asked was about liaison and these various things that apply in speech. And we basically just followed the original manuscript, I think, in that regard.
Yeah. But in reading it,
yeah, it gets.
Margaret, do you feel any need to sort of make things flow? You know what I'm talking about? From one word to the next.
Not really.
Or can you kind of read each word one at a time?
I like it that way. I think that the Creek language is easily spoken, and it isn't difficult. I would have a very hard time, say, learning the Kiowa language. Creek isn't like that, and it flows beautifully, when you speak. Let me just do a couple of lines for you. Esther's good. Remember, Hofono, Ponata Hakoso, LAVIS, Moment here, Iganaga, Hasa, Cosidoma, Obo Hasa, Cosi, Suki, Forty. It just flows. It's just that way, and Creek speakers, most of them speak about as slow as I do. And it's just an easier language to speak, and I don't find that necessary. So I keep it that way, one word at a time.
But the spelling system records a kind of slow speech formal phenomenon where the words actually are written separately. But when they're